All right, today we are diving into something really different, a radical new approach to AI that's not about making these models bigger, but actually making them smarter. It's called the synthetic cortex. And you know what? It might just be the blueprint for the next generation of artificial intelligence. So let's break down what that really means. For the past few years, the whole race in AI has been about one thing: scale, right? More data, more parameters, more computing power. The basic assumption has been that bigger is always better. But what if that's a dead end? What if we've been asking the wrong question this whole time? And that is the exact problem a new research lab called Cortex Labs is tackling. I mean, their technical paper opens with this incredibly powerful statement. They're basically arguing that the whole brute force approach, just scaling up existing models, has some serious fundamental limitations. We need a better architecture, not just a bigger box. So what's their answer? Well, it's a new blueprint for AI, and it's one that's directly inspired by the architecture of the human brain. And this isn't just another model, we're talking about a whole new framework for how an AI can actually reason. This right here is the synthetic cortex. Now think of it like an add-on, something that gives an existing AI new specialized brain regions. So instead of one giant do-everything processor, you get a system with distinct parts for things like memory, abstraction, and even emotional context. It's an architecture for thinking. And this visualizes the core difference just perfectly. A standard large language model, it's monolithic, one giant process doing everything. The synthetic cortex, though, it augments a core model with these specialized, interacting modules. You know, it's really the difference between a sledgehammer and a full toolkit. Okay, and this is where it gets absolutely fascinating. The first and, honestly, most revolutionary part of this new architecture is its ability to model emotional reasoning. So the system mathematically models the interactions of 13 key hormones and neurotransmitters. We're talking dopamine, serotonin, cortisol. The goal here is to create different contexts for reasoning by simulating that neurochemical soup that's constantly influencing our own thoughts. Now, this is a super important distinction, so let's be really clear. The goal is not to create a conscious AI that feels happy or sad. The goal is to give the AI the mathematical mechanics of emotion, using them as control variables to make its reasoning more nuanced, more context-aware, and, frankly, more human-like. This system uses a model called VAD, that's for valence, arousal, and dominance. So, for example, a high level of model dopamine creates a reasoning context of high positivity, but a spike in cortisol, that creates a low positivity, high excitement state, which completely changes how the AI prioritizes information. So the whole process is really logical. An input comes in, the system calculates those neurochemical values based on context, then those values reshape the AI's internal reasoning space, its latent space, and then the final response that comes out is conditioned by that synthetic emotional state. But this clever architecture doesn't just make the AI more nuanced, it also makes it incredibly efficient. The whole goal is to get the power of a massive model without the massive costs and size. Let's take a look at how they do it. Okay, so a key piece of this puzzle is a technology called latent space injection. This is basically a way to give the model access to huge amounts of new information on the fly, directly inside its reasoning process, but without having to retrain it or make the model itself permanently larger. And this illustrates the idea perfectly. Instead of making the brain itself bigger just to hold more knowledge, you just give it a library card. The AI can access all this external knowledge as if it were its own, but it doesn't have that massive computational overhead. It's brilliant. And there are other key innovations here too. The system uses these dynamic adapters so it can learn from conversations in real time, which means it avoids costly retraining. It also has a more efficient way to reason based on its own internal activity, which is a much faster alternative to chain of thought. And it even regulates its own processes to use hardware more efficiently. It's a whole suite of tools for doing more with less. Okay, so we've talked about emotion, we've talked about efficiency. Now we're getting to what is honestly the most mind-bending part of this entire project: rethinking the very shape of meaning and thought inside an AI. So most AIs today, they understand the world in a very linear way. You know, the distance between king and queen is literally a straight line in a vector space. But human thought? Well, it isn't that simple, is it? Right, because real meaning, especially when you get into abstract concepts like metaphor or cultural context, it just doesn't travel in straight lines. The relationship between ideas is way more like a winding path over a hilly landscape. And in geometry, this curved surface is called a manifold. So, the synthetic cortex is designed to navigate this curved geometry of thought. By finding the shortest path along these semantic curves, it can uncover these deep, nuanced connections between ideas, like understanding an analogy or a cultural reference that are completely invisible to an AI that can only think in straight lines.
So, after all that, what does this all add up to? Well, I think what we're seeing is a fundamental shift in how we could build artificial intelligence.
The core takeaway from this whole explainer is this. The path forward for AI might not be this brute force race for scale. Instead, it could be a race to design better, more elegant, and more brain-like architectures that are just smarter, not just bigger. And this leaves us with a final and pretty crucial question. It really forces us to ask what we're trying to build here. Are we satisfied with an AI that's just an incredibly powerful calculator, or are we actually aiming for something more? An AI that moves beyond just computation and toward a deeper, more human form of comprehension?